How do I stop feeling overwhelmed is a question that I get asked all the time. It's a really common question, and it is completely understandable. I don't know about you, but the sensation of overwhelm for me is a very heavy feeling in my chest. Sometimes it can feel like I can hardly breathe, or there's a very large person, or maybe an elephant actually, sat on my chest. But the thing is that there's an entanglement there in that as we start wanting to that emotion to go away and we start to worry about it and wish it would go away, have you noticed what happens? The intensity of it rises, doesn't it? And that's kind of rooted in the idea that big emotions are a problem. At some point, we've all been told that in some way, shape, or form, whether that was, when we were children, we weren't allowed to express our emotions because somebody said that wasn't okay. Or maybe as we've grown up, we've learned that some of these emotions mean there's something wrong with us. I think overwhelm can very, very quickly slip into what most of us call anxiety. It can go from that heavy feeling in the chest to feeling like we can't really breathe to feeling the awful angry butterflies in the stomach, the shaking, etc. There's a very quick transition, I think, between those two. And that's because it's the fear. It's the fear of the feeling. So when somebody asks, how do I stop feeling overwhelmed? The issue isn't the feeling of overwhelm. It's actually that question. It's coming from the idea that if we feel too much, we must be doing something wrong, or there is something wrong with us that we are broken. But in everything I do, in everything I share, I'm pointing to something very different. That the feeling of overwhelm isn't a problem. That isn't the problem. The problem is our relationship with that feeling. That we think it means something about us and how we're not well or something wrong with us, or it means something about the things that we've got to do. It means something about the world out there. And often it can seem with the feeling of overwhelm, the only resolution is to just work harder and get more done. I think that's how most of us try to resolve the feeling of overwhelm, isn't it? Just work harder with the inner critic on our backs with a big whip, trying to get us to go faster, move more, do more. But here's something really different to consider. What if that feeling of overwhelm is just a message to tune into, a message to just notice? Emotional intensity is not something to fear or fix. And I do think an awful lot of human suffering is caused by this idea that an emotion is something to be fixed. In fact, I'd say pretty much all of it. But in actual fact, it's a message from your system to let you know that you're carrying too much. Not that you're carrying too many things to do, although possibly overwhelm has driven you towards that, but that you are carrying too many thoughts. Overwhelm and overthinking are literally the same thing. Overthinking taking form as thoughts, images in your mind, words, however thinking appears to you. Overwhelm taking form in the body as sensations, as tension, as movement of energy. It's not an illness. It's not anything. And I have to tell you that I don't think there's anybody who doesn't experience that at some point or another, because that is a normal thing. It's a normal thing to experience overwhelm at some point. It's a normal thing to experience all sorts of different sensations in the body. But the trouble is that when we say to ourselves, how do I get rid of it? How do I get rid of that feeling? We're actually adding more fuel to the fire. And what we might think is, well, if I don't do something about it, I'm gonna be stuck in this emotion now. How I have to do something. But what if you didn't need to do anything? Remember, that's the mind saying you need to do something. What if you didn't have to do anything? What if your system, what if your psychological system has the same power in it as the rest of your system, that when you cut your finger, you don't have to you have to sit and stare at it to make it heal. It heals itself, doesn't it? That does itself. You don't have to do that. So what if you could observe that happening and just let the feeling move through you? I've spoken in other sessions about this, about watching an emotion move through you. There's no such thing as too emotional. Some of us have learnt that we are as we've grown up. Keep it down. You're too emotional. Don't be showing all of that. But that's not true. Nobody's too emotional. And that this difference between letting a feeling move through rather than getting, versus getting stuck in it, is that you can't get stuck in an emotion. It's not a thing, that. It might seem that way because if you're fighting it, you're focusing on it. And as you focus on it, it's like it won't go away, it won't go away. Well, it's because this is a self-feeding system. My mind is busy creating overwhelm. Then my mind is busy trying to get rid of overwhelm. And there's more busyness and more overwhelm. And then that goes into probably feeling like fear and anxiety. And it's feeding round and round and round. And it's caused initially by that, I need to get rid of it. I need to get rid of it as soon as possible. And all the time, our psychological immune system is there, moving the energy through. But it's feeding, the feeding that's coming from the thinking is reinforcing it all the time. So the resistance really is adding more pressure and making the overwhelm worse. And, I've spoken before about what the alternative to this is. The alternative is this acknowledgement that you are a human being who feels their thinking. When thought is believed in the moment, and that we've talked already about the thoughts that underpin overwhelm, like I need to do it all now and I've got too much to do and there aren't enough hours in the day and I won't be good enough if I don't do all these things. And look at my day, it's so jam-packed, and look at my list, that's jam-packed too, and how are the two going to work together? How am I going to get through this day, rather than being in presence and just picking up each thing one at a time? And that's what your body's saying to you. Your body's crying out and saying, hang on, do you want to put some of this down? Not the things to do, put down the thinking about the things. But trying to solve it through the mind is really exhausting, because the mind has created it and then the mind's trying to solve it. And that is a bit of a catch-22 situation. It's just feeding and feeding. There's a lovely quote by David Bohm, and he says, thought creates reality, and then says, I didn't do that. And I kind of add a bit on there on the end, and then the next part for me is, and then says, oh, but I know how to fix it, which is like, leaving a toddler painting on their own, particularly finger painting, I would say, and then, nipping to the loo and coming back and finding that the toddler's finger painted your wall, probably a white wall, and then asking the toddler to clean it up. No, put the toddler in the high chair, clean the toddler, then clean the mess. And then, maybe get the toddler to help a little bit when they're clean, to show that, to tidy up after, clean up after themselves. But we wouldn't just let them loose with a cloth. Oh, right, you clean it up now, because that would just make it worse. But that's what we do with ourselves. We think it's our job to fix it. The mind wants to fix things all the time. That's its thing. Solving problems, particularly for, the high achievers like me, people who like to use their mind for things. You might not even categorize yourself as a high achiever, but if you kind of intellectually like to solve problems, then probably you are. And that mind just wants to be in there all the time fixing. But what if we just could meet our emotions with presence, not performance, like not, oh, I've got to fix it, got to fix it. I've got to be high achieving at controlling my emotions as well as being high achieving at everything else. Something really powerful comes from this seeing how our system does self-right. It's it's really cool actually. It's really cool to see that, to see how our system does self-right all by itself without you needing to do a thing. Sitting with your emotions and seeing the energy move through it, it's reassuring, I think, that to see that that's the capability that we have. We don't have to do anything, we don't have to fix anything, we don't have to, you know, we don't have to be involved. The mind doesn't have to be involved in that emotional shift. It will do it on its own. It's presence that brings that about, I think, just being with what's there in the body. And that's something that, I've mentioned before, I do help my clients a lot with that, with learning to be okay with the sensations as they arise and not feeling like they need to do anything at all about them, because that's a trap that the mind has created, that it's our job to fix our emotions. So I really hope you found that helpful. Thank you so much for listening in. Take